All right, welcome everybody to CSM Mastermind. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our success coaching training program. We're back for our monthly live webcast today talking about getting promoted in customer success. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional training. We've got a global community of nearly 26,000 students on our skills development platform, and we've issued close to 20,000 credentials. Our programs are available in various formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. We've got a number of upcoming boot camps that still have seats available, including outcome-based selling next week, August 22nd and 23rd, led by my partner, Aaron Thompson. Our level 2 CCSM certification boot camp, led by yours truly, August 28th and through 30th, and a level 1 CCSM certification boot camp, also taught by Aaron, on September 25th through 27th. We also have a growing number of partners delivering some great content through our platform. We've launched a new strategic conversations workshop that's led by Bob London starting on September 5th. We have a difficult customer conversations workshop led by Anita Toth coming up on September 12th. Change management for customer success, a skill every customer success manager should possess, led by Toby Lucich, September 18th through 20th. And data-driven decision-making, led by Ed Powers, beginning September 29th. Tickets are also now available for our fall semester 12-week level 1 and level 2 coaching programs, delivered in partnership with the University of San Francisco Executive Education Certificate Program. And what that means is you pass our certification, you also get continuing education credits through the university. And that is one of my absolute favorite things that I do. I get to spend 12 weeks with up to 25 participants as we cover the key skills to be successful in customer-facing roles. We have a variety of special guests that join us, in-depth conversations about all the topics covered during the program, thought-provoking exercises, and great conversations to help everybody connect the dots between the skills they're learning and how to incorporate them into their day-to-day world. You can save $250 when you register by September 1st for the fall programs. So whether it's a self-paced learning, a boot camp, a workshop, or a more gradual weekly coaching program, we've got quality customer-focused programs and formats that will suit the needs of anyone and everyone on your team. So if you or your team members are looking to upgrade your customer-facing skills, we've got a program for that. Now, Ashley's going to drop a link to our program page and any coupons that we're offering right now into the chat. You can find out more about our online learning and instructor-led programs and workshops at successcoaching.co. The CSM Mastermind series is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic that is relevant to customer success. Regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the sizes of the customers you deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. And the schedule for upcoming events can be found at successcoaching.co. Speaking of which, our next mastermind session will be on September 20th, when we'll be talking about dealing with customer discontent. Click on the events tab at the top of the successcoaching.co page to find out more and register. There's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those practicing customer success on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do, and let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Chad.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew, and so happy to be here, and so happy people here from all over and watching in. So my name is Chad Horenfeldt. I'm someone that has about 20 years in technology and about 18 of those in SaaS and in customer success. So joined customer success really early on and started my career in Canada and worked for some great startups there, one being Eloqua, and that was eventually bought by Oracle. So, kind of good topic for today, because I started as an IC and moved my way up, and eventually directing 2 of our segments there at Eloqua. Then I was at Influitive and led to an executive position there, and then came to New York and have been in VP and head of customer success role. So my last role here is finishing up at Meta, where I was head of customer success at Customer with a K, which is a support CRM platform. And really, really happy to be here. This is an area that's really passion, a very big passion of mine. Helping people grow in their careers and is something that I really like to help other people with. So just really happy to be here, Andrew.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. Well, hopefully we'll be able to help some people today. Thank you, Chad. Dan, you're up.
Amazing. Hi there. My name is Dan, and I am based out of the San Francisco Bay Area, born and raised here. So sorry for the attendees from LA, but I'm in the better half of California.
Yes,
but just to start with a little controversy, of course. So I've been in SaaS for about 15 years now in my career as well. And so in customer success for the majority of that time as well. First starting off in a company that provided kind of hybrid services and software. And through my time there, promoted both from an individual contributor to managing a team, and then into a pure play SaaS company that was in the HR tech space. And again, moved from an individual contributor to a senior individual contributor to managing a team. And then similarly now at Monday.com, where I've been for the last 3 years, leading the scale customer success team, starting as an individual contributor, and I've been promoted twice in my last 3 years here. So it's something that this topic is one that's near and dear to my heart because it's one that I've had to employ a lot in my own career to get to the place where I'm at. And similar to Chad, it's the kind of thing that's been really rewarding to be able to work with others on and see how they've been able to progress and experience those type of transitions themselves. So thanks for letting me be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I'm also partial in Northern California, having lived in the Bay Area for 25 odd years before moving away to Sacramento area. But
we've been tempted with that same move once or twice. So I hear you.
Yeah, I've had enough. It's too busy down there. Anyways, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Kasey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kasey Wilson. I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, so I don't have much to contribute to the California debate here. I'm actually making my first trip in September to California, so excited for that. But I've been in customer success for most of the last 10 years, all in the technology space, from data center cloud services to unified communications with more of the SaaS space. And I started as a CSM, and then I'd moved over to project management briefly and came back to my roots in customer success. And at my most recent company, I've started as a CSM, grew to a senior CSM, and then took a little bit of a shift, but my entire time has been spent within CS here with taking over enablement for CSMs. Then moved into handling enablement for the broader customer success org, as we have multiple functions leading into that. And most recently moved into our strategy, operations, and programs team for customer success, and with that doing programs management. So if you're counting there with my most recent organization, that was 4 promotions in 4 years. So looking forward to talking to you all about my experience and how to grow within your CS career.
Awesome. You're just a walking, breathing embodiment of what we're talking about here today, right? That's great.
Trying to be, yeah.
Yeah, and as I mentioned during our pre-call, you're working for a company with a senior executive that actually Todd, my founding partner, and I worked with long time ago when we first met back in the day. The technology industry is so small. I mean, it's so big, but it's so small.
It is a small world for sure.
Very much, very much. Once again, though, we all appreciate your time today. So now let's get to the topic at hand and start the conversation. In the ever-evolving world of customer success, figuring out how to get promoted may not always be crystal clear. But hey, it's important for us to understand how we can navigate this landscape to achieve our career goals, develop the necessary skills, and make a meaningful impact on our organizations and our customers. But it's a two-way street where both individuals and organizations got to invest, right? As customer success professionals, whether we're individual contributors or leaders, we have this amazing opportunity to drive significant value within our company. So let's shine a spotlight on ourselves for this session and make sure we're growing alongside the industry and going in the direction that we want to be going. So let's start with a pretty broad question. From your experiences, what has been the most effective way to pave the way for a promotion in the organizations that you've worked for?
So I think one of the biggest things here is finding ways to contribute value above and beyond general role expectations. And you don't have to be a super tenured CSM to find those ways to provide value. You can be new and still have a lot to share, even if you're new to actually being a CSM. So we sometimes see a lot of team members expecting promotion comes with tenure, but this does not have to be the case. You need to be, don't get me wrong, you need to be good at your current role, but a way to distinguish yourself in a sea of really great CSMs is finding those ways that you can give back to the community. This can be as simple as helping identify and document process gaps, finding ways where you have a skill set that can help the team. If you're great with Salesforce reports, you've done data analytics, you are great with developing presentations. There are ways that you can distinguish yourself as a thought leader and be seen as a leader within your team and organization by finding those ways to not just show up and do your job, but give back to your team and make the entire team better. So I think that's the biggest way that I've seen not only myself, but also peers and others within my companies and teams really distinguish themselves and move ahead really quickly.
I love that. And I love that comment you said, it's not about tenure. It 100% isn't about tenure. When we were in the recruiting business, which we used to fund the development of our training program early on, I talked to a lot of people that expected, hey, I've been in this role for 2-3 years. I expect to be a director now. Well, that's not how it works, right? It's never worked that way in the businesses that I've worked in, the teams that I've managed. But something that also popped out at me is, how can you give back to the practice? I love that. I love this, finding ways to provide value beyond your role definition. This, I don't know about Chad or Dan in your teams from a management perspective, that actually was part of a quarterly OKR that I had every single quarter for my team. What are you going to do this quarter to give back to the team, to give back to the practice? Whether that's learning something about a new product feature and then doing a lunch and learn for the team so they understand it, or writing a wiki article, or recording a video of how to use a function for the customers. Have you guys done something like that?
Yeah, I would say on my end, one of the things that we've done to try to bake that into the role is, you mentioned it as an OKR. We reference it for us as one of our core competencies for our role is impact. And we mean that both externally with customers directly, as well as internally with the team. And so it's considered a core competency of the role that they have, just like any of the other core competencies in their role that we like to use when we're seeing how an employee is progressing in their skill development internally. And so we make sure that impact is baked in as just as much a core part of that. And so that can be owning, creating a new process. It can be owning, working with another team to streamline a point of friction. It can be, to your point, identifying documentation around a new feature release in the product to create a repeatable Loom video. Especially that's the kind of thing that in a scale team that I'm in, that goes massively far, right? The kind of things you can do to save other people time. And on a similar topic to that, adding to what Kasey was saying, very tactically also helpful to make sure you're aligned to when you're thinking about what can help you stand out, making sure that you are aligned to what the broader organization and your immediate boss, especially, what they need. Because if you're not aware of what that is, it's going to be hard to stand out and contribute in those areas if you're just making assumptions or not putting in the work to understand what it is that they need if you're thinking about it like a CSM, as your executive sponsor, so to speak. If you're not aware of what their main business need is that you can help move the needle on, it's going to be difficult to stand out for promotion.
Well, you're not thinking about it like a customer success manager. This is what your job is, right? Your job every day is to try and put yourself in the shoes of your customer. Do the same thing with your boss. Do the same thing with your organization, right? what is it that is important to them, and how can I align what I'm doing to help them achieve those goals? You are literally doing the same things. As a matter of fact, you can use some of the same tools. I know CSMs that have used success plans to plan out their career plan. Sorry, go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, just to add to that, a good example of this is that usually in high performing organizations, you have a quarterly planning session where you're planning out, like, here are key initiatives that we want to do, and maybe that's like a cascading down OKRs that come from the top. And then when you're starting to go through projects, that's when you raise your hand, and that's when you take the initiative. And I loved what you were saying, Kasey, where you kind of fill the gaps and you look for those gaps as well. And that's like a key thing that I did in my career. But you also raise your hand. And I think there's a couple other things just to add. One is, it's not like a one and done, right? You can't just take on initiative, do it, kick butt, and then that you're like, okay, I'm going to put that on my performance review and kind of hold that up. It's like, no, like, you have to be consistent. And so you have to keep that consistent drive going. And I think for people that are listening in today, I think this is even harder because we're in a really tough economy, and there's a lot of reductions, a lot of people looking for work, and these promotions are going to take longer. But you still have to have that fire in you, and you still have to keep firing on your cylinders. And then one last thing is that it's not a checkbox thing either. So it's not just based on tenure, what was a great comment that Kasey said on tenure and been here 3 years, you should get a promotion. But it's also not about checking the boxes. Like, if I do X, Y, and Z, then I'm going to get a promotion. It's just not. That's not the case. You have to consistently drive impact and just keep at it. And then, if you do those types of things, you have significant impact. And the last thing is you communicate that impact. And don't expect your boss to be the one that's highlighting that. You have to highlight it yourself. Do those things, and that will get you on the right path.
Yeah, you need to be a self-starter, right? You need to be a self-starter. You can't wait for somebody to come and ask you to do something. But I like what you said there, Chad, about communicating. Once again, think about it. Think about it from how you do your job, or how you should be doing your job, right? Your job is to ensure that the customer is getting value. Your job is to ensure that the customer is moving from point A to point B. Your job is to ensure that the people who have gotten that value know that they've gotten that value, right? It's the same stuff that you should be doing in your role, right? And you're helping the company, you're helping your boss, you're helping your team move from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. You're showing initiative. You're being proactive. That is naturally what customer success is all about, is being proactive. And you are making sure that the people who need to hear that value's been created hear it.
Yeah, unfortunately, some managers just aren't really great at communicating. And, that's the other thing I think was a really good comment by Dan, is like, look at what your boss needs and try and help them. And don't assume that they know and others know what you're doing. And what you're doing, because there's a lot of things you do that people don't even know about. So highlight those and communicate those out.
Exactly. Actually, we felt it was important enough that in our level 3 content, we actually have a module, a course just on creating your own personal performance dashboard, right? Which is something where you are tracking your own performance, and we supply a worksheet that you can then take and sit down with your boss and say, hey, look at here's all the things I think I should be working on. I mean, just like a success plan too, if you think about it, right? Here's what I think we're trying to achieve, but I want to make sure we're aligned, we're on the same page. Awesome. So let's kind of shift gears here a little bit. I think we talked about it's not about tenure. We talked about trying to find ways to provide value outside of your role definition, right? Making an impact, volunteering, being a self-starter, making sure that that the people who need to know that you're providing value know that you're providing value. But let's shift gears here a little bit, and we touched on this a little bit in our prep call, the concept of mentorship, right? Finding a mentor, having a mentor, right? How important has mentorship been in your career progression? I mean, I personally, I was fortunate to find a mentor early in my career in enterprise software who started out as my boss. And she is now a good friend of mine, and we still keep in touch after 25 years. And, she's still somebody that every once in a while I may call for to get some advice or perspective. So, from my personal experience, having a mentor was important, and I am a quasi mentor to a number of people when I have the cycles because I believe it's important. But how has that helped in your career progression? Anybody want to jump in first?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I'd say that I didn't necessarily look for a mentor early enough in my career, or didn't prioritize that. And when I was a consultant, I had a phenomenal manager. He was the CEO of our consulting firm, and he came from Bain, and he was a wonderful mentor. And over 20 years later, he's still my mentor, and he's phenomenal. But one is that you don't necessarily have to rely on your manager. And I think my challenge was that I probably had a bit of an ego, and so I didn't necessarily think that I needed to seek out a mentor. And so I'm sharing with everyone here that was a mistake. I did have very good leaders that I could rely on and leverage as mentors. And I think maybe the other challenge that I had is, early on, we just didn't have that many people in customer success. So it was really hard to, seek out the communities that you have now. Because if I fast forward to today, I mean, first of all, I've joined organizations and sought out mentors. I've paid to have executive coaching out of my own money because I think it's really, really important. And I even have my own peer leadership groups that I've joined that I find immensely helpful. And I know even, Dan and I, we communicate through Slack, and it's really, really helpful. So I think it's something you should do early on. It's something that's really, really important. Leverage all of those different communities that are out there. And I think too, is that there's really great programs like Catalyst has a great program. Women in Customer Success has a really great program. Take advantage of that. It's so important. And it's something that I wish I did early on in my career.
I've been part of that. I was actually part of the initial Catalyst mentorship program. And I thought it was a great program. It was a great experience. I haven't had the time lately to dedicate myself to it, but I was happy to be part of the launch of that because I like what Catalyst was doing in that space. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, mentors? I would say adding to that, absolutely. It has been immensely helpful. And I've been fortunate in most of my roles to have that within a manager as well, whether they were my direct manager or someone else within the organization. But while that has not always been the case, it has always benefited me to find someone that I can talk to. And even when I have a mentor within the organization, I can't stress enough the value of having someone outside the organization to talk to as a mentor, and how that doesn't tend to happen automatically. And sometimes it can be intimidating, to Chad's point, when you're thinking about trying to find a mentor initially, to make that ask of someone. And so transparently, I'd also just encourage building those informal relationships initially, getting to know someone, and even just finding someone who you can just make small specific asks of to get some advice from and perspective on. It doesn't have to jump straight into a full-on mentor relationship. Just getting even that outside perspective in little ways can be really helpful. And if what's holding you back is it feels intimidating because you don't know what you're even asking someone to be when you're asking them to be a mentor for you in a certain instance, start with just a very particular area that you'd like to get some help in. If we're just getting tactical for a second here, if you find someone who's done some of the things that you want to do in your career, letting them know, hey, I'd love to chat with you for 30 minutes about this area that I'm trying to break through and that I see that you've done successfully. Do you have 30 minutes to talk about it? Then you're not asking someone to make this big commitment to being a mentor, but you're still getting a lot of the benefit of that. And sometimes that leads to longer relationships and a mentorship comes out of that. Otherwise, you just get a really valuable 30-minute chat with someone who you really respect and look up to. So don't necessarily put all the pressure into an actual formal mentor either. That's immensely valuable, but also don't overlook some of the other more informal relationships you can have that provide a lot of that value as well.
The more. So I like to use the term. I 100% agree with you. Term advisor, somebody who's an advisor, more great informal word. Advisor than a mentor. Kasey, what about you? Any mentors in that you've had in your life?
Yeah, so I feel like
they've had?
Yeah, so I feel like I've had more of the informal mentorship route, and I'm now joining a more formal internal like company mentorship program. But I think one of the biggest things, and I don't want to repeat what Dan and Chad have very eloquently laid out for us. I think one of the big takeaways for me and what I've found extremely beneficial is finding those mentors even within your organization and your role, finding those people that you can connect with. And when you're running into a challenge or don't know how to tackle something or want some help, guidance, second set of eyes on something, that you have those people you can go to and those trusted individuals that you can go to and ask for help without judgment, and that you can also do that in return. So I've had great connections with peers where I've really felt like I can go to them for anything and get someone else to provide input. So I think that's one of the biggest things when you're coming into a new company, finding some of those people that you can connect with and, forge a relationship, and you can both go back and forth with those items as they come up.
Love it. Love it. Great. Thank you.
And one other thing too on the mentors is that it doesn't have to be a person that you meet with. It can also be someone that you aspire to be, and maybe it's like this informal mentorship where you just follow their work that they do. You read their articles and you just read whatever, listen to their podcasts. So that's another form of mentorship. For example, like Brene Brown, she's a mentor of mine. Have I ever met Brene Brown? No. But has she changed how I lead? Yes. Like, has she made me a better leader? Yes. Has she made me even a better person? Yes. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. Mentors can be found in all different shapes, forms, sizes.
Love it. Thank you. Just a quick mention, we now are live on LinkedIn Live. So if anybody's actually joining us from LinkedIn.
Maybe Brene Brown will join us. You never know.
Maybe Brene Brown will. Apologies for the
AI
delay.
Software.
Apologies for the delay there. There was apparently a technical issue with LinkedIn. So if you do have questions, they will be relayed to us. All right. So let's now kind of switch gears again and talk about skill sets. What kind of skill sets do you believe are critical for advancing within the customer success field, and how can you how do you propose developing those skills? Kasey, I think you wanted to chime in on this one.
Yeah, so I think a few areas that are going to be relevant across industries, companies, any role here is going to be developing that executive presence, leadership skills, critical thinking, and I'd say just general communication skills. So those are going to be universal across any CSM role, and honestly are going to help you in any role if your career does pivot away from customer success. One thing that I liked, what an old manager of mine used to say when he would talk about CSMs and, manager is in your title. So you are a leader here. You are a manager. Whether or not you manage people, you are a leader and you are a manager. And so I think that's one of those really critical skill sets that you have to be comfortable with developing as a CSM. And I think in addition to the leadership, is coming with solutions when you're talking to your manager or another person within your organization. So start practicing that muscle of not just coming to ask for help, but actually proposing solutions and talking about what you've done up to that point. And so I think a great way that you can start flexing that is coming with that, here's what I need and here's what I've done, and then posing it more as a what else can I do here versus what should I do here. So that's one way. And I think with communication, a good format that I've found and had learned about within enablement here at my company was what was called the CAB model. So CAB being conviction, action, and benefit. And it's a way to be succinct with your communication and taking a moment to actually think about really what you are proposing and what action needs to be taken. So it's just a format that you can use that allows you to think a little bit more critically and present yourself well there. And for general, just learning resources and going about developing some of these skills, what I've found has been super helpful is actually LinkedIn Learning. I feel like has a lot of really great resources, and for subscription, it's pretty inexpensive and you can get a lot of content. And I think just shadowing with some of your peers is a great way to learn. And not only do you pick up on what they're doing well, but I think another great thing you can find there is maybe something that you would do differently. So everyone has their strengths, their weaknesses, areas of growth opportunity, and picking up on some of those ways like, ooh, I really like that. And I'd change this one thing that they do to make it my own. So I think that's a great way. And I also have found that Gainsight has a lot of great resources on their website, a lot of great blog posts. So I think that's another easy way to get some ideas as you're looking through and trying to develop some of those skills.
Yeah, one thing just to jump in here is I think that was really great, Kasey. And one of the things just to point out is leadership is one path, but there's lots of different paths for people in customer success, especially customer success managers. And one of the things in terms of skill sets, first of all, it depends on the company, right? Like if it's a more technical company, being more adept in the product and knowing your product, that can go in so many different ways. You can go into product management. You can go, who knows? Like you can sales engineering. So that's just one thing to consider in terms of thinking about promotions, thinking about accelerating your career. Another one that I've seen work really well is around data and really being able to break down data, analyze data, pull insights out of data. And if you're able to do that and not only help, your customers, but help the organization, then that's another significant thing that you can pick up in terms of, leveraging that data. And that could mean, depending on your organization, it can mean maybe you need to know SQL because maybe you need to go like deeper at the database level. Maybe you need to know Tableau. Maybe, you need to know Excel. Whatever the case is, that's always something that I found to be, super, super helpful. And I think that just communication in general, just improving your communication skills. I think, Kasey, you touched on that. And those are just some really great skills that you can pick up and that can help you.
And one other comment to add on that lens, I would say, as you're developing your skills, keeping an outcome-focused mindset with your skills. So when you're thinking about those skills, not just as inputs, as things you're developing, but focusing on the outcomes that those skills display. Because especially when we get into later parts of this conversation where we talk about demonstrating that value or demonstrating how you've been able to do that, you want to be able to translate that to outcomes. And I know I'm speaking every CSM's native language when I'm talking outcomes, because we want to not just talk inputs, but focus on the outcomes. But I think we can forget that with our own career sometimes and think of skills as just an input, when in reality, our companies don't value skills as an input in the abstract. I mean, just being blunt, they care about the outcomes that we're achieving with the skills that we're using as our inputs. And that's a key part of making sure that we're able to advocate for ourselves in being able to develop our skills and be promoted.
Yeah, because nobody else is going to advocate for you. You got to advocate for yourself. And just a reminder, a lot of that stuff, a lot of the key skills that you need to be in customer success are the types of things that we teach in our programs as well. Mm-hmm. Communication, active listening, empathy, understanding the customer's perspective, how to build success plans, which, by the way, like I mentioned before, can be used as career plans. A lot of good stuff in that. So definitely check that out. We've already got 16 questions from the audience. So let's actually shift to questions here, because we definitely want this to be a learning event, a learning exercise, and answer your questions out there. Now we have 17. If, by the way, you see a question on this list and you're really interested in getting it answered, upvote it, okay? Because I'm going based on most upvotes. Our first question, our most upvoted question, comes from Zach. Zach, thanks for joining us and thank you for the question. Zach asks, how do you go about demonstrating or communicating the value you create in the company? What does this look like? And it looks like Dan just jumped in there. You're chomping at the bit to answer this question, Dan. So go for it.
Yeah, I definitely had a little bit of Zach's question in mind, honestly, when answering that last one as well, when we were talking about the skills inputs. I think it starts with needing to be able to focus on tying, like I mentioned before, the outcomes. You need to be able to document those, I think, making sure that whatever system you use that lets you document what the actual outcomes are that you're achieving and how you're adding that value to your company. It could be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet as you're starting, just a way to remember that your memory is not going to be as good as you'd like to think it is when you're trying to think of the value you're adding. And if yours isn't, your manager's absolutely will not be. Because like Andrew mentioned, we're going to need to self-advocate. So making sure you're documenting outcomes and added value that you are actually providing. And to that end, a very, very important tactical skill, and again, this is very similar to what you would do as a CSM anyways, know what matters to the person you're going to be presenting this value to. If you know that what your boss most cares about is improving a particular process that's been a pain point for the whole team, focus the outcomes on what you've done to reduce friction in this area. So know your audience and communicate to them, which primarily will come through whether that's one-on-ones with your manager and being able to highlight that because they're not going to see everything as much as they'd like to say that they're on top of knowing everything. As a manager, I can be honest, we don't. And so being able to advocate for that and share those examples from what you're documenting with them in those informal conversations, and especially in those more formal touch points, whether that's a formal review, feedback talk, whatever that looks like in your organization, communicating and showing those outcomes that you've achieved. So making sure to focus on those, because I think the mistake that a lot of CSMs make when trying to advocate for themselves is pointing to tenure on its own or pointing to inputs that don't have an output associated with it, an outcome that is moving the needle for the company in an area that matters to your boss or that matters to the broader organization. So communicate that and make sure that that's a regular part of what you do so that you can actually be highlighting those and advocating for yourself and being clear that you want this to be something that is contributing towards a broader goal that you have for what's next, and transparently being patient with it, because like Chad mentioned way earlier in the conversation, you're not checking a box one and done. You're going to continually need to present value. And just like with your customers, where you're constantly having to win them over with the value that you're providing, you're doing this internally as well.
Once again, it's just like a success plan, right? We need to identify and document quantifiable outcomes, things that we can point at and say, look, I'm making progress. We're making progress to, getting to this point that we all have agreed we need to get to.
Andrew, I'm going to just counter your point a little bit here. I think we're focusing and overemphasizing on skills and tangible impact. There's also the intangible impact that's really, really important. And this kind of comes down to your attitude and, this idea of a growth mindset. And so, I'll give you an example. If you're someone that comes into a meeting and, your manager's presenting, their plan and, you're poo-pooing the plan, and you're a negative influence on the team, you're not going to get promoted. I can guarantee you that. So you have to be setting the right examples and doing the things. So, for example, updating your CS platform, it's a pain in the ass. Nobody likes to do that. You can ask anybody in an interview, but, you're not going to get promoted if you're not updating your call to actions in Gainsight as an example, because you're setting the wrong example. And on the flip side of that, you want to look for, we talked about at the beginning, looking for opportunities where you can help out other teams. So, that idea, that growth mindset is really, really important. And I'd say that one of the biggest pieces of advice that was given to me, and this is kind of answering that question specifically, like, how do I get from, let's say, a CSM to a senior CSM or moving up to the director level? It's sharing your knowledge with other people. And Kasey, you mentioned that earlier on in terms of taking something and maybe sharing it with others, or Dan, I think you mentioned as well. But a lot of people, they're like, listen, I did my work. I helped the customer. I did my QBR. I'm going home. I'm done. But if the whole team doesn't ascend, then you won't ascend. And I think that's a really big mind shift that usually takes place, after you have some experience. but it's really, really important. You have to share what you know, and that's going to help everybody get to that next level.
Love it. 100%.
I'm talking about less of the data and outcome side, but I know a lot of us can struggle sometimes with, how do we measure the impact that we're having? And we can sometimes struggle with this with our customers and then also with our internal customers. And I think a couple things you can do here is one thing that, and I'd heard this from a webinar that I'd attended a while back about imposter syndrome. But one thing you can do, because I know we all get to the end of the year, get to the end of the quarter, and we think, what did we do? What did I do here? And what was that impact? Collecting feedback that you get from people throughout the quarter and throughout the year is a great way to have not just something that you come and tell your manager, hey, this is what I did and this was the impact, but this is what other people are telling me is my impact about the work I'm doing. So collecting and I think they referred to it as like a kudos jar, but having a repository where you take that feedback that you get from customers, internal partners, your peers, but actually collecting that in a centralized resource and then having that at your disposal to say, hey, this is what people said about the work that I did. So I'm not going to tell you what I did. I'm going to let others tell you what I did for the team. So I think that's one way that you can go about doing it. And then second is you can be a bit creative with how you measure impact. And this is something that I spent more time with in the enablement and program space, but you could also implement it as a CSM. If you helped put together a resource for the team, you could send out a survey beforehand that just says, how confident are you with your presenting your EBRs? And you can then go through, have people just give their level of agreement with a statement, and then pulse the team again afterwards and just see, okay, now that we've rolled out this new deck that I created for the team based off of what I was doing for my customers, how confident are you in, your EBRs? And then you can just measure that. Here's how confident people were before. Here's how confident people were after. So you can get a bit creative with how you actually quantify and present out some of those impacts that you've had on the org.
Well, you're creating your quantifiable outcome.
Yeah.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Zach. And Dan, thank you for hitting the done button without me having to ask you. You've been here. You've done this before. All right. Our next question. By the way, we got a lot of questions from anonymous attendee. Why does that not surprise me in this webinar for some reason? I don't know why people don't want to unless they're talking crap about their companies. Anyways. Our next question. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. We go till 15 past the hour. So if you got to leave at the top of the hour, we'll still be answering as many questions as we can, and just catch us on the recording that'll be posted next week. So our first question or our most popular question from anonymous attendee. Can you speak to some of the red flags to look for that might help identify dead-end situations with an employer? How can we evaluate whether the things we are doing are actually going to lead to promotion and it's not just the company milking your time and effort for everything they can get without the real chance for promotion? Wow, I love that. I love that question. I've actually been in that type of situation myself. Chad, you got something to jump in on this? Yeah,
I mean, it's really simple. Just ask the hiring manager, please go through the last people that you promoted and, what was the promotion and, just tell me a little bit about that situation. So if they say nobody, then there's a situation there. Now, if they say nobody and then they qualify and say, listen, we're having a really tough economic time right now. And, we don't need to necessarily promote people at this point. I kind of push a little bit more, but that would be a simple way I try and, ask about that. And if you, in the interview process, ask other people, ask other departments, that will give you a sense of the culture.
And
I would.
Kasey.
Go ahead, Kasey.
I I would say the other thing here that you can do if you're feeling like, am I being taken advantage of, essentially, is to be proactive in approaching your manager leadership on creating your personal development plan. So being proactive and saying, hey, this is where I want to get to. These are the things that I'm doing. What else can I, be contributing? What are the skills that I need to develop? And coming with your outline first. So I always think people do better with seeing something and then saying yes or well, more like this. So come with a plan. These are the things that I've done to develop. These are the things that are in progress that I'm working towards developing. These are all the ways that I'm going about it. Here's what I plan to do next. And this is ultimately where I want to get to. And having them give input into that plan. And I think Andrew had mentioned at the beginning, almost creating that success plan, right? For you do it as a CSM, do it for yourself, but getting that feedback from others in your org that are eventually going to weigh in on that decision. And you have something concrete that you can work towards. And ultimately, sometimes you do have to leave an organization to get promoted if it's not the right culture fit for you, or there's things kind of playing against you from just availability of promotions and things of that nature. But that's how I would probably approach that if you're feeling like you're not set up to actually get promoted from your efforts.
You don't show up to a customer meeting to talk about where you're going to go with a blank success plan. And quite frankly, if you are, you're doing it wrong. So you got to show up with something. And so that's a great point, Kasey. And if your manager who you're having this conversation with is kind of either pushing back or is kind of playing for time or doesn't want to give you specifics or doesn't want to give you feedback, big red flag.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Start working on updating that resume. And
also,
the only other thing
ask them how many people were promoted to managers from within the organization versus getting hired from outside the organization. So that's just another barometer as well. Yeah. You want to really join an organization where there's a leader, where their philosophy is on growing people. And yeah, I mean, at times you're going to have to bring someone from the outside. But I had a situation at Meta where Meta has a very high caliber in terms of their management, and I fought my upper management in terms of promoting somebody internally, because I knew that person had the qualifications. I knew that person had the respect in their team, and I knew that person would be a great manager. And so that's the thing. But you have to suss that out if you're joining an organization and ask the right questions of that leader.
Dan, did you have anything to add before we move on to the next question?
I think the only other thing I would add, especially earlier in your career, is to make sure that you're asking for that feedback directly, because there is sometimes, and I've experienced this early in my career, where there can truly, before we've developed the full self-awareness that we want to have in our career, we could be the ones with the blind spot, not missing an obvious area that we want to grow in, and it feels like, oh, this might be a dead end. And a manager may not have given feedback as proactively as we would have liked, but there's something that we're doing that's getting in the way of that isn't actually a dead end that we can truly address. So I think asking for that feedback very directly will help you understand sometimes whether something is a dead end or there's just a blind spot that you haven't noticed that could be getting in the way.
Awesome. Thank you, anonymous attendee, whoever you are, for the question. We'll move on to your next question, or maybe it's somebody else's. Anonymous attendee once again asks, what specific skills are required to go from CSM to senior enterprise CSM? First of all, it depends, right? It depends where you're at. Like, to your point, Chad, hey, maybe you're in a more technical role, so maybe getting those technical chops. I've always seen in the companies that I've worked with and worked for, people in those senior positions are typically they're dealing with much larger customers. They're dealing in a particular vertical. If you're dealing in a vertical, you need to understand that vertical really well to get to that point. If you're dealing with larger customers, some of the things, Kasey, that you pointed out around executive presence, super important. What else? What else do y'all
Yeah,
believe?
I think there's a couple of things. Like, one is that I want to see that person is able to, take things by themselves. Like, are they taking things off their manager, or are they just throwing things up to their manager? And it's like, wow, this is a really difficult negotiation. And that's fine to bring in your manager to get advice. But if you throw it to your manager, just here, take it. Like, no, like that person's not necessarily ready yet. So that degree of like that taking ownership of things, that's another kind of soft skill, but really important. I'd say the other one is, are they working at the tactical level only with their primary contact, or are they establishing really great relationships with that senior stakeholder, that person who's the decision maker? And so where that person operates, that's another really, really important thing, because yeah, we can gravitate to the incoming issues that come into our inbox or through Slack, or on the product. But are you asking the really difficult questions, and are you asking the right person those difficult questions? They're going to get the outcomes that you need, like Dan said, that will get you either retention or growth. And I think this kind of goes into one of your upcoming sessions with Bob London. But mastering those abilities, that's really, really important, because just like you want to exude trust from your customer and you want to have that trusted relationship, your manager has to have that trust in you, that you can be in those situations and you can handle those situations. And they're not just doing it because they want to hold you back. They want to do it so that, you're going to be comfortable in that role and that you're going to succeed in that role. Because the worst thing a manager can do is put you into a position where you're going to fail, especially if you've been doing really well and performing really well. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I like what I think it was Kasey mentioned. I forgot to comment on this because it was definitely one of my management credos to my team: show up with solutions, not just problems. I mean, that doesn't mean, I don't mean solve the problem for yourself, but the point of that is when you have issues, show up and show that you've done some work. Show up that you've took some initiative, you thought this thing out, you've done some problem solving, right? And some decision making, and now you need somebody, you need an opinion, right? That's this person's thinking more strategic. What else? Dan, Kasey, you got anything to add?
I think Chad hit the really big items there. It's really about being strategic, both internally and externally. And yeah, like what I'd mentioned earlier, you really need to, if you're coming to your manager, you've exhausted all options. You have done your homework. You have self-served. You have pulled in peers. Like, you have really gone through and done what you can. And you're now coming through and saying, hey, this is what I need from you, and having those ideas. So I think that's what will set you apart from others and really take you from being a CSM to a senior CSM, or senior to strategic or enterprise, is really thinking critically and coming with those solutions, and having really researched all of your options before trying to just pull a manager. And that's one of the biggest things I've seen sometimes with CSMs and working with a lot of our managers, is getting frustrated with the lack of self-serving. That they're like, well, I just had to type this into the search the same as you would have. So why are you coming to me with this question? If it's a 10-second search and you haven't done your due diligence, that doesn't make it look like you're ready to take it to the next level.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. And specifically when talking the enterprise component, a lot of it all boils down to the complexity, like demonstrating that you're able to deal with all of the added complexities that would come with navigating an enterprise account, whether that's things like Chad touched on, like multi-threading being so important, or even just the way you're able to exert influence over people who you might not be directly meeting with, in the sense that when enterprise accounts, while you may have fewer accounts as an enterprise CSM, you are working with significantly larger organizations that you're therefore less one-to-one influence over end users and adoption and things like that. So being able to demonstrate that, and so avoiding that you're making the mistake of just thinking about this as, I've done well with smaller accounts, I'm going to be great with bigger dollars, and that's all this is, and not acknowledging what goes into those accounts. So
yeah, it's being able to handle the tactical all the way up to the strategic, right? Being
Absolutely.
able to handle, how do I drive adoption at my end user level, to How am I? How do I connect the quantifiable outcomes that we've defined to overarching corporate objectives? So that I can demonstrate we're having a positive impact on the company achieving their goals. Right? That's the kind of thinking that I want to see in a leader, where they're connecting the dots between what we're offering, what we're providing, and how the effect that it's having on the overall company. Right? That's senior enterprise CSM. Anonymous, once again, thank you for the question. Another question from Anonymous. Anonymous asks us, and remember, it's top of the hour, but we're going to keep going here as long as we can because we've got a lot of questions left. What are some effective ways to actually track your accomplishments in your role? Is it beneficial to think of your accomplishments in different categories, placing them in those buckets so you can quickly put together the story around the areas your manager, hiring manager, if applying for jobs? I think we talked about this. We touched on this a bit. And like I said, we actually also, we've developed a worksheet. Think about it from a worksheet perspective, something that you can, we developed a worksheet in our level 3 content where it's meant to, every time that, every 2 weeks or whatever period you want to track, when you're sitting down with your manager, you're duplicating this, you're creating tabs, in this worksheet of, okay, here's where I'm at now. And it's just like the evolving success plan. Right. And
what I'll add to that, Andrew, is that before you even to make yourself effective, maybe during those meetings with your manager, is that, one thing that you might want to do is journal. So, you could do this weekly and just write down, what are your top 3 accomplishments that you did this week? And then that way, if you start to capture those things, then it makes this whole process really easy. But that's another up-leveling thing that you can do that will help you, as you go in life, because it's not just about doing. You have to reflect. You have to think about what you did. And then you also have to ask yourself tough questions hey, here's a situation. How could I have done this better? What did I learn from this situation? And so that's just something to consider as well.
Yeah, reflection is key. I love the journaling. Anybody else?
I think just to your point, just documenting it because it's happening is not enough. I think that just boils down to it. It's the Pixar it didn't happen of the professional world.
Yeah. We have another question from Anonymous. Boy, Anonymous, you're asking a lot of questions today. How does one know they're ready for that big promotion, that big level up from senior CSM / team lead to head of customer success and beyond?
I would say you want it. And maybe Kasey, because I know you've been promoted a fair amount of times recently. I'm sure you have got a good opinion on this.
Do you actually want to run the entire department? Some people just, are fine with it.
So I think it's, a good point that there are people that feel that are comfortable in their current role and don't necessarily want to move to the next step. And I think our culture, here in the US, is always that you need to be moving on to the next thing, and leadership is the goal that everyone should have. And it is okay if you are comfortable as a CSM and you do not want to move into a leadership role or move into something else, and you just want to be really great as a CSM. I think that's totally okay, and we tend to really heavily promote that you should be wanting to move up to the next level. So I think one of the big things is, do you want that? And also, are you still learning and growing in your current role? If you feel like you're going about your day to day and you're not being challenged and you're not learning new skills, I think it's that point in time where you can go, all right, I'm ready for that next step because I feel like I have mastered, at least to some extent, my current role. And now I'm ready for something new. I'm definitely the kind of person that can get bored easily if I'm not challenged and learning new things. So if you've kind of hit that wall and you're like, I'm doing the same thing and I'm doing it well, but I'm just not feeling that sense of accomplishment from personal growth, I think that's the biggest time to go, I'm ready to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, but once again, that next thing doesn't necessarily have to be management.
Correct.
When I think back on my, years as an operational executive, and I had many years as an operational executive, just like Chad and Dan. Let's go beyond the glamour of the title, right? Well, you are going to be responsible for defining and executing a strategy that the entire company is going to be looking at you to execute correctly. You are going to likely own a budget, and you are going to be responsible for staying within the boundaries of that budget. You are going to be responsible for hiring and firing people, right? So if there's a downturn, you're going to have to let people go. It's not all freaking rainbows and unicorns, right? So you need to have the intestinal fortitude to be able to stack rank your folks and let people go if the situation arises.
Yeah.
You're going to have to deal with company politics, because no matter how great your culture is, there will always be shit going on that you're going to have to deal with as a leader, and you're going to have to deal with it outside of your team. And God knows I had to deal with it so many freaking times it was ridiculous. As a matter of fact, it was so bad in my last full-time role, it's what drove me to run my own company. I finally said, I'm done with it. Okay.
We all benefit from it. So that's good.
Yeah. Thank you. And then you have to deal with, and I'm probably missing something, so I'm looking for Dan and Chad to
chime in. I mean, you have to deal with
personalities.
You have to deal with the crazy customers, right?
Yeah, like you have to deal with the crazy customers that none of your team has been able to deal with, right?
That's right. Like they're like, here you go, leader. Go handle this like procurement person that I have to, or go. This person's really angry. I think they want to talk to you. They want to talk to the head of CS. So that's why, like, my first reaction was like, you have to want it. Yeah. Like if you don't want it, then you're not ready for it, because it's very challenging. And a lot of times you're not ready for it anyway, which is fine. You're going to learn, but you have to be ready for the challenge and accept that it's going to be a rocky road.
Well, but see, my point here is that I 100% agree with you. You have to want it, but you have to know what you're wanting. That's my point. Exactly. Right? And I think people don't realize that, there's this flashy title and you're probably going to get a bump up in pay and some more stock options and stuff, but there's a lot of baggage that comes with running.
It's going to just be great mentoring, coaching one-on-one opportunities. We're going to get all these things, and the team's improvement's going to go way up, and I'm going to get all the kudos. And you realize that you actually get none of the kudos because all the individual contributors are who get shout outs, right?
Yep. And, which is what you want, right? You want
exactly.
You want your team to get the shout outs. It's not about you, it's about them.
Absolutely.
Agreed. So I like you said, Chad, you have to want it. Whenever I get that question from somebody, I say I always caveat it with, okay, you got to want it, but let me explain to you what that looks like. And it's not to dissuade people. I know some amazing leaders. There's a couple of them here today. I know some amazing leaders, right? And I'm not trying to dissuade folks, but you need to go into a leadership role. You either need to go into a leadership role with eyes wide open, or you need to be a masochist. So one or the other. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Anonymous, for the question. Next question comes from Jasmine. All right. We finally have a name attached to a question. I don't even know if Jasmine's still. Oh, Jasmine's still here. Great, Jasmine. Glad you're still here. Jasmine asks, Chad, to your point about promotions taking longer in this economy, how do you effectively acknowledge this with your manager while also advocating for yourself?
Yeah, I can just start off. I would just say that one thing to also keep in mind is that you're always the driver in this relationship in terms of your career. Your manager is the passenger. And so you have to be the one that's pushing for this. And I think that's fine. I think you should be advocating for yourself. I think that when your manager says, listen, there's nothing I can do, right? Like a promotion usually encompasses not just impact, but it also encompasses responsibility, like increased responsibility. And it's just not something that I can do right now. I don't have, because the other thing that you don't know, and they're not going to necessarily tell you, is that, and I saw this at Meta very directly, there's only so many promotions that there can be, that you can see and have. And that's just the reality of it. And it sucks. And I think that what it's going to require from people is patience. And if that's not something that you want, I think just like what Kasey said, you can go somewhere else, or you can look for another opportunity. But you need to advocate for yourself as much as you can if you've had that impact. And I don't know what else you can do. I don't know if anyone else has any other suggestions.
Yeah, I think the reality is that sometimes you are ready for the promotion, but the promotion isn't there.
Yeah.
And that can be because of economy, or that can just be there are limited advanced roles. So you could have gotten that, gone back and gotten that degree, or you've completed some of the CSM certifications and you're ready, your skills have been developed, you're ready to move into that next role, and it's just not available yet. So that is sometimes the case, and that's where sometimes you do need to look outside the company if it truly isn't going to be available right away. There can also sometimes be ways where you can actually carve, especially if you're interested in some of the supporting aspects of customer success, which is where I've veered more into, of not being that customer facing. But are there ways do you have a CS operations team? Do you have a CS programs team? Do you have enablement for CS? Is there a way that you can do dual duty, or if you're interested in those realms, is there a way that you can essentially have a role created for you that doesn't exist today? So part of that is communicating what your interests are and pointing out where there's gaps. And that can be another way that you can potentially create that promotion for yourself where that role may not exist today.
I love that. As a matter of fact, one of my colleagues, one of the most well-rounded executives that I know in CS, she went ahead and went into product. She went into support. Mm-hmm. She did voice of the customer. So she did, she did customer journey stuff, right? So she did all of these things as she was trying to work her way up into. I mean, she knew what she was getting into. She wanted to get into a VP of Success, a Chief Customer Officer type of role. So getting that exposure, that experience as a product manager, getting that experience running a support team, getting that experience handling voice of the customer, in addition to her experience building and running a customer success team, just made her that much more of a well-rounded individual. And she, that leadership role wasn't available when she originally looked into it. So she did exactly what you said, Kasey, and went around and did some tangential things and just built her resume up, built her experience up, which was awesome.
The other thing that you can do is, I had this exact example, and that was a really good point, Kasey. So this person, noticed that there was no community manager, and we needed a community manager. And they looked at companies of similar size, similar revenue, similar space, and said, hey, look, they've got a community and they've got a community manager. And so, it's not just about your own resume, but you can bring in external factors and bring that data in, and that can help you with your case.
For sure. Awesome. Jasmine, thank you. I think we got time for one more question. And I'm going to go around the panel here and get your quick impression of what this individual, what Anonymous again, boy, Anonymous, we asked a lot of questions, what Anonymous is looking for here. When leadership is not fully supportive of your promotion, even as you outperform goals and go above and beyond the scope of your current role, does it mean it's time to switch companies? Let's start in alphabetical order with Chad.
I think you need to understand what the reasoning is, or get that feedback from your leader. And then I would look to talk to other leaders as well, because usually there's not just your leader, there's usually some cross-functional input from others, and just look for commonalities. Because going back, it's to what I said earlier, it's not just about your goals and that what you've accomplished. It's also the other factors, just the non kind of skill factors like growth mindset and things like that. So you need to get that feedback and understand where you need to improve. If you feel that you don't agree with it, and that's up to you, then it might just be that it's time to leave.
Dan,
I was going to say, yeah, the short answer, it depends. The longer answer doesn't necessarily mean that. And to Chad's point, asking other leaders, but additionally, I think that it's just really important to make sure that you are aware of why they might not be supportive at that time and understanding what's going on, getting that feedback. And I think really asking yourself the question that Kasey mentioned earlier is, can I still learn in my current role? Because if the answer to that is yes, it might not be time to leave because you're still getting a lot of value from your current employer, current support structure, something you know and you're growing in. So if the answer to that is still yes, that you're still growing in your current role, I'd almost advocate for it's worth waiting out and growing more where you can, I think. So not defaulting to time to go.
I love that. Right. The grass isn't always greener. The thing you need to remember is, yeah, you might be able to get that promotion, but guess what? You're going to have to now learn a new product, learn a new customer base, learn all the new contacts within your org. There's a lot of work that you are going to have to go through in order to get to the level you're at right now. So even when I was trying to recruit people out of organizations to put them in other roles so I could get paid, when they were telling me, hey, I've got a great thing here, yada, I'm like, dude, why are we even talking? You need to stick around. You're in a good place, right? So make sure you're taking a step back and saying to yourself, is this really the right thing for me to do? And last but not least, Kasey, before we wrap things up.
Yeah, I think this one is tough. It's going to depend, but really get that feedback. And you need to be willing to go into that conversation and accept some constructive criticism and realize that maybe there is a reason and that you have room for opportunity for growth. If you're not willing to be receptive and acknowledge weaknesses, then you may be in a tight spot, and that may be part of the problem as well.
Yeah. Don't let your biases get the better of you. Be self-aware, be open, listen to what they have to say. And maybe you're not at the level you think you are. All right, we're at the end of our time for today. So I think it was a great conversation, but it's not what I think, it's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself, our guests, or Success Coaching. Once again, thank you, my amazing panelists, for spending time with us and for the ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices that you shared. One final note, great CSMs know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created CSM Mastermind, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. Once again, we hope to see you at our next event on when is our next event? On the 20th, when we're going to be talking about dealing with customer discontent. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everyone, until we see you again.